virtual female beauty. Thanks so much for joining me today, all of you. And we're going to have this program without one of our panelists who was my Aboriginal representation in this group. But today we'll have to do without her. So welcome to our show on International Women's Day. It's the last day of the month. So this is just the most appropriate time to close this month with, this beautiful panel. So thank you so much for joining me. And I'm going to allow you to say a few words about the most important things that you'd like to share with our audience about the work you've done. And then we can proceed. So let me start with Harriet Tinka.
Oh, thank you, Mary, for giving me the opportunity. And I also want to thank our other panelists for also being part of the conversation. For me, really, what I have been doing in the community is basically making impact with young people. My focus has been, and I've worked with many communities, but my passion is always to work with young girls. And I want to make them see who they really are, see them, the beauty in themselves, make them realize it doesn't matter what the outside conversations are. You are a wonderful person. You can do whatever you set your mind to. So my goal really is to always make sure that I help them be the women that they're supposed to be. So for now, that's all I'll share. You'll get more later.
Sure. I know you recently won an award. Maybe you can tell us what that award was.
Oh, it was the recent one was with the National Black Coalition of Canada, and they have many awards that they give to different recipients, and I felt honored to be part of that group. The award that I got was called the Phil Fraser Award, which is given for literacy or art or visual arts. For me, it was the books that I've been writing. So these books, the one that I specifically was called the Self-Esteem Passport. So it's a book that I've been sharing with schools and a community on how to love your self-esteem and not disempower yourself thinking you're not good enough. So it's about seeing your self-worth. So I felt quite honored to receive this award, and it gives me motivation to keep on doing what I'm doing.
Thank you so much for your work, Harriet. And the other two panelists are not unknown to the community. Both of them are pretty well recognized. So let me move on to Keren Tang, who is an old friend of mine. Thanks, Keren, for joining us today. And I'm so excited to have you on the panel because you've been so influential in the work you've been doing. And I hear your name everywhere. So let's hear, maybe 2 lines. It's very hard to compose in 2 lines what Keren Tang really means to me. So I just want to allow you to share what you think, you want to share with our audience.
I don't know if I'm really deserving of your high praises, but thank you so much, Mary. And it's lovely to see you and to be here with everyone. And congratulations, Harriet, on your recent award. That's quite an accomplishment. So my name is Keren Tang, and I am a city councillor recently elected in 2021 to represent the Southeast Ward of Garehio in Edmonton. I guess my lifelong passion is always working with youth, with Indigenous and newcomer communities to support health promotion and civic engagement. There.
Thanks so much. Let's move on to Lisa Holmes, who's recently been appointed as a chief of staff at the city of Edmonton. I'm so excited to meet you, Lisa. I've heard lots of beautiful reviews about you from people who know you. So I look forward to engaging with you more to really understand the work you do. So let's hear a little bit about your background and your engagement with the city.
Oh, thank you very much, Mary. And I look forward to getting to know you better as well. I've heard so many things about you also, and excited to hear from both of my fellow guests that are on here. I also, like you said, work in the world of municipal government like Keren does, but my background, I came from small town rural Alberta. I was elected myself when I was 30 and served as a councillor and mayor and president of Alberta municipalities. So I had an entire career in politics when I was a young woman and a young mom. And so my passion in life is supporting women in leadership roles. I'm on the board of the YWCA, and I've been really trying hard to find ways to promote women to take more active roles in their community in any sort of leadership But I do a lot of work trying to get them elected, because I think that's really important that women have a seat at a table. And I was so excited to see Councillor Tang elected in the last election, and when we had obviously a record-breaking number of women on Edmonton City Council.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And it's really great support for councillors, especially our women councillors, when there is somebody like you right there to support them in the administration. So thank you so much for your presence and the work that you've done and you're going to continue to do. So let's move into the three main topics that we are going to talk about. The first one, of course, is, my biggest passion is getting women to to deal with the glass ceiling and to move into roles. Does not matter what the color of their skin, what their background is, but to be able to allow them to operate in the areas that they would love to, and they would be very effective if they were given a chance. So first of all, I'm going to go to Keren, because I know that last election, we were like, fingers crossed, Keren is going to win, but it didn't happen. So we were so happy that this time she did it. So Keren, how does it feel, to have broken that and to have come into the place that you deserve to be?
Oh, I really appreciate that. And I'll just add, Lisa is the chief of staff, but you didn't say for who, and I think it's a big deal. Chief of staff to our mayor, and I think it's great to, the first time I met Lisa was actually the very first women in politics panel that I sat in on just to listen, like, what is this all about? And it was organized by Equal Voice, and Lisa, you were the keynote speaker. I don't know if you remember this. And then that kind of set me off on this journey of just learning more about this world. I became a citizen in 2015, and never prior to that thought that I could even entertain this idea of running for office. And I think that really changed that year. And then there's, I've learned so much, and I've continued to build that network. And I think that that notion of the glass ceiling, I think, is something that it's not like you are elected, therefore you've gotten there. I think it's a constant process, and it's very iterative. You're just constantly about building capacity. And I think the thought that's very constant on my mind is, now that I am here, how do you demonstrate to the public, to Edmonton, that we welcome all kinds of leadership style to the table, all kinds of voices to the table, and I think of myself as not your typical hero leader kind of person, and I have my way of doing things that comes from a very I think intensive community organizing background. So how do I bring that and bring what is my value contributing to the conversation? And the second thing that's really important to me is, now that I am here, how do I make sure I create spaces and opportunities for community members to constantly build their capacity in civic, whether it's politics or engagement or civic literacy. So there's a lot of opportunity. I see my office. I hope to work with lots of different kinds of people, creating spaces and making sure we elevate women of diverse background, but people of diverse backgrounds, young people, newcomers, people of color especially, so that they have their opportunity. And if I can facilitate that, if I can create those spaces, that is what I'm trying to strive to do.
Thank you so much, Keren. I'm sure we're waiting to see the impacts of the work that she's already started doing. So let's move on to Lisa. Lisa, I know that you're working with our amazing Mr. Sohi, and I know right now he's in his Crystal Palace and we can't reach him unless we talk to you. So so how do you see the work of the office going on? And you came in much later than he took office, so there was this little bit of a lag time for him, which is not very great when you become a mayor. You need somebody right there and getting the work moving that he expected. So how do you deal with that? That little bit of lag time that you have to catch up. You have to play catch up, right? And yeah,
that's a really great point. I joke with him that he was just waiting for me. He was waiting for me to come along. It's kind of like a mom coming in and calming everyone down and making sure that everything is going smoothly. But No, I did. I started in January, so I missed the beginning portion, like the end of 2021. And a big part of that was budget. And like Councillor Tang can tell you, it was a really big process, a lot of learning, a lot of orientation, I'm sure. And so going through that in itself was a process. So I think my starting in the position was when we really started to kickstart his agenda, to be able to start talking about the platform that he ran on, what Edmontonians chose when they chose him to be the leader, and to really go through and start talking about how we can support this council to ensure that it's moving forward the agenda items that are their priorities in the best way. So excited to see him work on his biggest passion project, which is obviously a houseless population, trying to look at affordable housing and supportive housing, and where any sort of way that we're able to move that forward. We've been able to push that a narrative a lot. Obviously, the anti-racism team that was put together, the coalition, and that motion was also a big moment. And now we're just seeing sort of the next phase of things. So that would be moving into more conversations with the province on some of these big ticket items, like being a part of FIFA 2026, which is really exciting. So yeah, it's great. I'm really honored to be able to work with such an incredible human, someone who leads with his heart, leads with empathy, and really opens the door to so many communities and people who feel like they have never been heard by the mayor's office before. And we have a lot of measures in place now to ensure that happens. So we make sure that we are meeting with community groups who we can tell have never been met with before. And we have metrics to ensure that takes place on a regular basis. He's going to a lot more community events and just really trying to be out in the community more, as am I. So yeah, it's a great opportunity for both of us. It's a lot of fun.
Perfect. We are really looking forward to seeing how it moves forward. The FIFA, of course, is going to bring a lot of nice revenue to the city of Edmonton. And we are probably going to see some kind of economic, improvement from the COVID times, because it has been so down and so many businesses have suffered. So we just look forward to this new development with hope. Harriet, let me move to you to kind of, get an understanding of the background experience that caused you to get into this field of empowering young women, and how do you see the impacts of the work you're doing? Maybe you can tell us a short story about something that happened.
Oh, absolutely. So I actually was working for the city of Edmonton. I was a senior accountant there until 2020. And the reason I actually was I was doing Empowered Me on the side. So what I was doing is I was doing workshops on weekends on self-development, goal setting, building healthy relationships. So I have a program called The Power of 12. And it was all about not just young girls, even in schools, Indigenous community. So I was going everywhere on my days off or on weekends. Then it got to a point where I was in demand. Everybody wanted me here, there, and everywhere. And I couldn't take time off from the city to do the work. So in 2020, right before COVID-19 happened, I resigned from the city and decided to do that. And then, of course, that's when nobody wanted people being around them. So I had to rediscover myself. And part of the reason that I decided to work on Empowered Me was a few years ago, and I'll give you the short version of it because we don't have much time on that. I was going to university. I had done international modeling, and I decided to quit that and focus on my education. I went to University of Calgary. While I was there, I made a really good friend. And when you're going through a relationship, there's always red flags, things that tell you this relationship is not good. But you ignore them because you're living in a fantasy world. So I did that. So at the end of the day, I was abused. I was kidnapped. I was stabbed and left for dead. So I was basically had to fight for my life. Here I was modeling internationally and I was walking the runways, but I was stabbed and I wasn't able to walk. I had to learn how to walk all over again, which was a little bit ironic. I was a model and now I was a cripple. So after I stopped feeling sorry for myself, I went through all this mental health back and forth saying, why me? But if not you, then who? So I had to be real with myself. And I decided to use my story to help other young girls or young women who've ever been in a situation of a domestic violence situation, so they can use my story as a cheat sheet on how to make your life better. So that's my main thing now, is to teach young girls how to really watch out for yourself, be careful, and also targeting mental health, because right now, especially with COVID-19, the mental health became such a big deal. People actually realized mental health is actually real, and COVID-19 made it valid. Like we all go through it. Some of us handle it differently. So that has been really my purpose right now. And leadership is a choice. Not everybody in leadership roles is actually a leader. It's a choice. Some people are charismatic. They are more managers than leaders. So for me right now, that is my goal. I've been going to a lot of Indigenous communities right now. I'm fully booked most of the time. So I've been busy, but I feel like my purpose is here and I'm excited about it. I'm excited to be among all of you ladies. I'm learning so much from you. So let's carry on the conversations.
Thank you so much. I'm sure there are a lot of women looking at you and thinking, wow, she really is inspiring. Thank you so much for that. So moving on, the second really important topic that I want to discuss today is about racism. And Keren and me have been working in this for a few years prior to her entry into city politics. So, like, I was so excited to know that, with Mr. Sohi, at least the anti-racism council that has been set up at the city. Hi, what's the name?
Her name is Summer. Okay.
Yeah, I remember.
Yes, she was a baby.
Yeah. Okay. So, so basically, what is the current plan for that anti-racism council, and how do you see the milestones, being set for the? I mean, is there any targeted milestones that are set? How is it moving forward? And this question is to Lisa.
Well, I'm actually wondering if Councillor Tang probably knows a little bit more details about this than I do.
I wasn't really paying attention to the question, so.
Just more details around ARAC and if there's any milestones and targets for it. I think we're at the point right now where it's about to kind of spin off and become its own new entity because it was approved.
So I think I remember, Mary, when you came to City Council public hearing. I wasn't elected at that time, but I think I watched that public hearing that time, and you were, really advocating for this advisory body. I remember, and then, a few years later, and I think with the mayor's very first motion when it comes to anti-racism strategy, that also helped to, I want to say, expedite, this work quite significantly. And I think earlier, when was this? February? There was a big discussion about the direction of the strategy, and worked really. The ARAC Anti-Racism Advisory Committee worked really closely with other committees, which is actually quite unprecedented because previously a lot of the other advisory, whether it's accessibility or youth or women, they kind of work on their own. And for this time, they presented a very cohesive position, and they presented as a delegation on the importance of the strategy. And the recommendation came with that is sort of an evolution of what ARAC could be. And I think, Lisa, you're right. We're now at this point where it is a bit of, so the milestone is kind of what is the next step of the formation of this committee. But a lot of work, I would say, have gone on, and since the election really got spurred on by the mayor's motion.
Okay. Would you like to maybe put some kind of plan that is happening? Is there a plan with a certain set milestones in that, or?
Yeah, I think this work really needs to be led by the advisory committee itself, and they're the ones currently working with administration developing that plan, and I think we'll be hearing from them very soon.
Okay, thanks. Perfect. So that was really on my heart, and I've been really wondering, for the last year and a half, what's happening really. So I'm glad to see Shalini Sinha is the president of the ARAC, and I've been having some conversations with her too. So I'm keeping tabs of what's going on, but I really don't know the inside story. So I look forward to seeing some of these things actually on the ground, that we had spent so long to put in place. Like a lot of people had met together. There were so many stakeholder discussions, and we'd come across putting like so many different people's ideas together. And it's so hard when you try to do that. But we were able to come into a few key points that would help move the anti-racism work with the city of Edmonton. So I'm hoping that, moving forward, Iraq is able to accomplish some of those milestones. The third one that we were looking at is social equity, and that is not just related to anti-racism, but to every other disadvantage that's a barrier to accomplishment or for citizens of Edmonton. So like people with, different kinds of abnormalities, disabilities, and stuff like that. So Lisa, is there something that the city is doing to accommodate more than it is already? Or is there a plan to accommodate different kinds of other disabilities?
Well, we've had a lot of conversation around it. I know there is an advisory committee that is set up through the city, and there's a councillor representative on it. I don't know if it's Councillor Tang. It might be, is it? Yes. I know from our office, I can give you just the perspective that we have had a lot of conversations with disability advocates from the community. We had a really exciting moment when Marla and Kuno, the service dog, came in to visit the mayor, and she really spent like a good hour outlining what her perspective is as a person who lives with a physical disability and how she navigates through her life in Edmonton. And it was a meaningful conversation to hear directly from her some of the challenges she faces. And it gave us a lot of thought on how we're able to move forward with some of the platform commitments the mayor had, or some ideas of things he wanted to implement in a different way. But we do talk a lot about navigating through the city, and it might not just be with, like you said, physical disabilities, but also as women. There was just a conversation that happened about transit security and a transit safety plan. And that's incredibly important conversation that's happening right now. And the number of women that we heard from, or the number of parents who have young women that are taking transit to get to school or jobs. I think there's so many ways that we all can navigate through Edmonton, and we find different challenges. And so it's really important to be open about what those are, so we can continue to find ways to address it.
Yeah, I am the mom of a young lady who actually recently was trying to, she thought, gas was too expensive. So she decided to take the LRT. And so she was waiting at the bus station, and there was a guy who approached her and asked her for a smoke. And she said, "I don't smoke." And so he started shouting at her loudly, and she was so shocked. Like, she was actually very traumatized with that experience. She couldn't believe that somebody could just shout at her because she didn't have a smoke. Mm-hmm. And then she was a little bit frightened because she's pretty, petite and thin, and she's not really big, so she felt very intimidated. And this is not an uncommon experience for young people. I told her to dress better next time so people don't approach her like that. She was in her PJs, and I said, you cannot go out in PJs because, that's when people consider that maybe you're homeless or you don't have a place to stay, and they can treat you any which way, right? And then, of course, I said I would drop her to the station, to the LRT station, instead of having her take the transit. And it worried me a little bit because then, you're not sure about the safety of your children, which I never worried about before prior to this experience. And then there were two other men who were in the same bus shelter who were also giving her weird kind of looks and stuff like that. And luckily the bus came in time and she was able to get out of that situation. So this is not a one-off experience. I'm sure that if my daughter has experienced this, other young girls are experiencing the same situation. And it's not a great thing when our city is not safe for our children. So I hope that there will be some kind of work done on this area, because there's lots of beautiful young ladies in our city who don't want to go through the trauma that my daughter faced.
So, I think there's a lot to unpack there, Mary, but I guess I wanted to add a little bit to what Lisa was mentioning in terms of your original question, because you were asking about accessibility. And yes. I guess I just want to add, historically, the issues around accessibility and service delivery around that is actually historically, falls in the provincial responsibility. And I would say accessibility is actually quite new to municipal government. And the Accessibility Advisory Committee is also a relatively, I think, a new committee compared to some of the others. And I think the city has to learn a lot, because when it comes to planning your sidewalks, your roads, these are actually really important considerations. And just being the council sponsor on that committee, I've learned so much more about just intersectionality and what does it mean for diversity and inclusion. Hold on. Okay, you gotta wait, because it adds a whole new layer of, it's not just one kind of disability we're talking about. We're actually talking about multiple, and we need to have people with those experiences on top of all the other intersectional identities, so that we can really get a fulsome picture. So that said, one of the tools I think that's really important is gender-based analysis plus, which is now a requirement in every single policy report. And so we're not just talking about accessibility, we're talking about age and all the things that present a very diverse experience. So I'm sure we can talk a lot more on the transit safety side of things and how it affects gender and women and children and seniors. But I'm going to stop there, because as you can see, it's a little busy over here.
It's actually interesting to see how daughter participating in the conversation. So for me, when I am actually working with young girls, one of the biggest things that I teach them is self-defense and how to act when people are around you. For example, your daughter being there, what are the things you should be looking for when you're around people? The self-awareness is very important. I think it's important, yes, to let the municipality and the federal government really make accessibility very safe for us. But also at the end of the day, we as our own self, we have to be aware. What do you do when people are around you? What are your self-defense? What should you be looking at? The eye contact. Because I always like to teach the young girls, when you're walking, you make sure you look that person straight in the eyes. Then you don't become a victim. Then they know, okay, they already identified me, so I know not to mess up with them. So making the people around you, teaching them how to be really aware of the things that are around you is really important. As we're waiting for accessibility and all of these things to be true, we also need to work on ourselves and see what can we do for ourselves and for others. So it's really important.
Oh, that's a very good point, Harriet. Because in education, I feel one of the biggest things that we have to learn is how to be strong individuals in our own right, and that's not being taught in schools. And I hope schools teach those things. Like emotional intelligence and management, as well as financial intelligence and management. These two things are so lacking in our education system.
I think the funding comes into play too, because I know a lot of schools would love to do a lot of things, but sometimes there's no funding for it. So sometimes they just do what they can with the funding they have. Because I go to a lot of schools and they say, how come you don't give them these options that I'm offering? They say it's all funding at the end of the day. They would love to do it, but they have to go with the curriculum and the funding that they have.
Yeah, but imagine if they're only getting knowledge and they're not getting these managing skills, like day-to-day managing skills. What kind of individuals are you releasing back into society? I mean, they're not competent enough to run their day-to-day life.
Yeah.
So to me, I think these are really fundamental, but I'm not an educationist, so that's all I can say. I mean, I could just say it, but that's it.
Yeah. They're all the non-cognitive skills. They don't teach them. They teach them the cognitive skills, but the non-cognitive skills, because you can't even measure them. So they don't know how to measure those. It's just life experiences, I guess.
Exactly. And as you said, awareness, self-awareness is so important.
Yeah.
I'm learning it quite late in life, but I wish I'd known way before. Maybe I would have been something different.
Better late than never, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
So going back to this issue of sexism in our city of Edmonton, what are the key areas, Harriet, that you would identify needs work?
That's a big one. Sexism. So define sexism.
I just mean when it comes to women, how they are treated in different areas of society. For example, just like my daughter at the bus station, but different other situations where women are treated differently, and they don't get their say, or they're not allowed to be who they are.
Yes, I think sometimes society sometimes will judge you by the way you dress, which they shouldn't. But sometimes you just have to be just yourself. See, okay, I'm going in this situation. How do I show up in this situation? What do I need to do to show up in this situation? For example, if you're going for a job interview, dress for success. Always put in 110% when you're going out. Your daughter, when she was going out, she knows, she's going out. Just dress accordingly, dress comfortably, but nobody should be judged by the way they dress. That's not an excuse to treat other people the way they're dressed and say, oh, this person is dressed this way, that means that should never come into play. But that's how society is. So you just be mindful of how you show up in society. I think that's really important. And sometimes we have our own internal dialogues. We think we make assumptions that people are going to judge us by the way we think they're going to judge us. So it's almost an equation. There's so many moving parts when it comes to the whole sexism thing. It's a very complicated topic.
Yes, it is. Keren, do you think there are areas in our, in our work and in our life that can be changed by some policy changes that will accommodate women more?
Yeah, I mean, there certainly can be policy changes. I guess two things specifically for women in politics. Since this election, we have actually a number of young parents on this council, and one of the first things we did was actually modify the council meeting hours. Though I think we often do go over, but we try our best to recognize family with very young children. The time you have with them is actually quite limited. But a policy change like that actually really benefit a lot more people in City Hall, because everyone, like many people, have families to go home to. So that's something that a policy change that can perhaps actually make local politics much more welcoming to diverse people. And I think the other thing too is not just policy, but it's societal culture. I think when you have women politics conversations, you often talk about social media and the impact that's very disproportionate on women leaders. And there's been lots of efforts to highlight that. And that, I think, comes from a societal culture that's quite pernicious about the things you say online is actually quite different than how you would say it to someone in person. And women face the brunt of that kind of abuse online. And so I think it's, I'm very conscious of those things and try to manage my, my social media presence so that I have a healthy mindset and I can remain healthy mentally and emotionally to show up and do the job.
Thank you so much for that. I know of some companies which have daycares within their premises, so that women with young children can bring their kids to office, and till they finish working, their child is taken care at the workplace. So it's much easier for them to just pick up their kid and go home without having to make another stop and then go and get groceries or whatever, and then go home and finish the rest of their evening with the children and the family. So it's really a difficult life for a working mother with young children, and that's just one of the options that is available. Some companies have done it, but not everybody can do it. But there has to be more opportunities for accessible daycare, which I think a lot of work is being done already. But still it's very hard for so many women, I've seen, and it's very expensive for so many women. So there is a little bit of work that the city has done, I think, about giving some subsidies for daycare to lower the cost of daycare. Am I right?
So childcare is actually provincial and federal funding and responsibility, and that policy has passed to make childcare much more significantly more affordable for a lot of families, in Alberta. And so now, I'm benefiting from that policy change right now myself, and I know it's benefiting a lot more people, especially women who are, working, who are low income.
That's awesome. It's really nice to see that change, because I remember it happened just a few years ago, if I'm not mistaken. So the next really important thing is, I see that lots of organizations where, the expectation is to work on anti-racism and newcomer engagement and stuff like that. There is not much diversity on the administrative teams of those organizations. And many times it is a very mainstream kind of, top-down management, which is working with these kind of issues. So what do you think, Lisa, can be done to change this? Because if you don't have diversity at that level, you really don't have the perspective to support or even listen to people of diverse cultures and to actually understand their barriers and to be able to work to break those barriers, because you don't even understand.
Oh, that's a really great point. I mean, one thing I was really proud of in our office is that we do have, in what my opinion is quite a diverse team, but not just in race. We have a diversity in, like we have someone who identifies as non-binary, which I think is really important in the conversation. But we have almost all women. And the interesting part is that we put out a really nice post on International Women's Day to celebrate the fact that we're 83% women on our team. And we got so much pushback and negativity on it on social media. It was horrible.
Wow.
And a lot of people calling us out for being, non-diverse or non-open in our hiring practices because we only hire women, which is not the case at all. But it definitely shows a societal conversation that needs to be happening around people can't be chosen for jobs that they don't apply for. So getting people into the space where they feel confident enough to be able to apply for positions, and that the hiring practices are open and accessible, and that they're ones where they are able to really dive into making sure that they have practices and policies around diversity and inclusion. So I think all of those things are really important. It's not always the case. I think that there's a lot of longstanding institutions that have a long ways to go. But one of the ways that it starts is with having a leadership that reflects a little bit more of what the electorate is. And I hope that now with this new council, we feel that it does. I know I've heard a lot of people say that, especially about having a mayor who is the first mayor who is a person of color up there. Being able to stand and represent Edmonton is really important. But yeah, policies and practices I think are great. And also, like, as someone who does the hiring, making sure that you are open to what experience looks like. Because that's something that I think is also really important. Sometimes it might not be a post-secondary degree. Sometimes it might be a mixture of a lot of different things. It might be degrees from other countries that may not be like deemed equivalent, but completely are. Just being open to what a person can bring and what the perspective is and their life experience, I think is important too.
Totally. I mean, I'm totally, I second what you just said, because I've worked a lot and advocated a lot about anti-racism. But the question was, like, within the city of Edmonton, HR, how is HR comprised of? Like, does it have people of color? Does it like have a diversity of people from different backgrounds, age groups, diversities?
Like in the actual HR in administration?
Yes.
I'm not totally sure. I haven't met most of them, so I wouldn't be able to tell you. I know that the deputy city manager is a white woman, and I know that I met her, but I haven't met the rest, so I'm sorry.
Okay.
But I have heard anecdotally that there's a long way to go with the city of Edmonton, and that they're working towards it, that they're acknowledging that there is issues there, and that they're building processes and policies that should be, making change, systemic change there. And maybe that's something that ARAC is also being addressed through their work.
Yeah, I think the city will be 0.0, and from there, there will be a lot of, positive change in other organizations, because the city truly is a model for everybody else to follow. So if the city does not have that, it cannot expect that from, nonprofits and other places. So, first clean your space before you tell other people to clean their space. So that's what I'm really hoping that with this new management, with this new council, that we will see some change of that kind in the future. And I'm really, really very hopeful. So thank you so much for the work you do. So what is, as women of different races on this panel, what are the kind of things that you've experienced over your time, in your work, in your social life, in your whatever other areas that you are in, like maybe sport, that you probably would not have had if you were a person who was not a person of color. I mean, the mainstream community. So the question is to Harriet.
Oh, okay. So for me, for the city of Edmonton, I was the only senior accountant that was Black. So I was always the only one there. And at that level, there's other people who are also Black, but they were in lower positions. But I knew what I wanted and I pushed myself to go there. So it was always different because it'd be a crowd of so many other different ethnicity, but I was always the Black person in the group. So I always have to lean in, as Cheryl always says. Most people hate that statement, but it has been always being a Black woman and being in a position that I am. I always found that I have to work hard, and not because I'm Black, it's because I always go for excellence. I don't use my color as an excuse to say I didn't get it because I'm Black. For me, I go 110% to do what I do. But I also know there's systematic issues as well. Sometimes I won't get something because of the color of my skin. But I try to go over that and just try to advocate to other women, other people of color, to say, you got to keep pushing, you got to fight, no matter what the system is. You be the first person to put your footsteps there, so others that come after you can use you as a role model. Because most people will not try to do something if they see nobody there that looks like them. So for me, I want to be the person who's there so people can say, okay, just because there's nobody else who looks like me doesn't mean I cannot do it. You just have to keep on pushing. And I know there is racism, but let's just keep pushing and work together. So it's really important. No excuses, just get it done.
Yeah, I like your attitude. But did you face anything just which was very obviously because, you were a person of color?
I did, yeah. I remember applying for my very first accounting position, and my last name was Schotenkamper. So when the hiring manager met me, she said, "Oh, I was expecting a German woman." I'm like, clearly I'm not German, because my husband at the time his last name was German. So I was an honest student. I was with distinction. So everything that should be an accounting position, he loved it. It was just disappointed that I was Black. So he called me and said, "You will not fit our culture. We can't hire you." So I said, okay. So that day when he said no, I actually went to the city of Edmonton and got the job right away. So it's all a blessing in disguise.
Wow.
Yeah. So those things happen. They're there.
Quite interesting. Thanks so much for sharing that story.
Yeah. You're welcome.
So I have to go. So if I can just jump in quickly, and I'm gonna hop off here. But thank you so much for your Harriet. I really admire that can-do attitude, and I will say I often take that very similar approach as well. I think as women of color, you just have to work so much harder than our counterparts, whether they're men or white women. That's just that is a fact of life, and I think it is also incumbent upon us, as kind of at the beginning of this, is that once you get there, you find ways to open that door and keep it open for people so that they have more opportunities. Just on the city side of things, well, you know what? One company's loss is the city's gain. So I really appreciate that, Harriet, that you found an opportunity at the city. It is a constant. We strive, there is an inclusive hiring process and policy. And in fact, there's a framework called Art of Inclusion, specifically around hiring. And I think more and more but I think the first thing is to actually have that conversation to say, we need to do better, and, here's how. So I'm glad that we're having that conversation. It's very top of mind, I think, for our leadership. And, I am aware of a variety of, tactics, such as name blind, et cetera, et cetera. So I know that the efforts are there, but we're not necessarily at the goal just yet, but it is a journey. And I guess the last thing I'll just leave in terms of the various experiences I've had, I think one thing that doesn't really come up very frequently as women of color is sometimes that lateral violence within our own ethnocultural communities, because of, that are so male dominated to begin with. And then I think so as women, like, we face multiple layers of challenges and discrimination. And then sometimes, how one ethnocultural community and the discrimination against another, for example, and I'll, sometimes immigrant community and the way they perceive indigenous community, for example, I think comes with layered racism and discrimination. And I think that's something we have to recognize. And I myself have most definitely face a lot of that. And sometimes it comes from some of the most, I guess, surprising places. And it's a reminder that this is something we have to keep fighting, no matter where we are and no matter who we're talking to. But it was a pleasure to be with you, ladies. I really appreciate the conversation. And and I hope, Lisa, I hope to see you soon in City Hall. And Mary, I hope to see you soon. It's so nice to meet you, Harriet.
You as well. Thank you for your information. Great advice. Great information.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, thank you for your experience sharing, Keren. That was really, really important for us. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bye. See you.
Yeah. Say hi to your daughter.
So so basically, I think we've covered most of our ground. Is there something else that you'd like to share with our audiences before we close today for International Women's Day? An inspiring statement?
Go ahead, Lisa.
Inspiring. I want to hear more about Harriet. I find her incredibly inspiring. I guess I'll just be really short and say that, I've been really privileged and lucky to have some incredible experiences in my life. They were not always easy, but they were definitely made easier because of the race that I'm in. And I can acknowledge that. And I have felt the difficulty mostly of just being a woman and the sexism that I found in politics. But my piece of advice is always that everything hard was an incredible risk. Like everything that I did that was difficult, every decision I made that had the most impact, that really propelled me forward in a big way, was because it was risky. And I decided to take that leap. And had a big impact on not just me, but on my family, and not always in a good way. So if you have a support system that you can build up, your kind of, village of people that can help you is really important. But taking risks is sometimes kind of the biggest and best thing you can do, to just try to believe in yourself.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for that. That's so true, actually. Many times it is very risky things that, lead to big successes and achievements in life. So thanks for that. That really is so perfect. Harriet, a closing line from you.
How can I follow Lisa after she said all this? I'd like to follow. So I like what Lisa said to our listening audience. And what I really want to leave to our audience is really, at the end of the day, maybe ask yourself 3 questions every day when you wake up in the morning. Just ask, for example, one of the questions, how can I serve today? Like, what kind of an instrument of kindness can you be today? So that's number 1. And then number 2 is what do I love about myself? Just ask yourself, because whatever you love about yourself, you can shine it through and let everybody love you for who you are. And what do I want to be today? So those are the 3 questions I want everybody to ask themselves every day. So number 1, how can I serve today? So it's about your purpose. How can I serve today? And then number 2, what do I love about myself? So that's really important, because that's about self-awareness. And then the last thing is, who do I want to be? Whether it's today or for the rest of your life, that's important. Who do you want to be? So that's what I would leave our audience to really be mindful of themselves. Don't judge yourself. Don't let any other internal dialogue become your reality, because it's important who you show up as tomorrow and every day. That's what I want to share with your audience. Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure having our other panelists. I always learned so much from and I had so much value in this hour that we spent together. So back to you, Mary.
Thank you so much to actually Keren, who's left us, but her inputs were awesome and they really were so impactful. She's a very, very influential woman, and I'm so glad that I had Lisa, who has joined us very recently, but we are so happy to have you with all your background in municipal politics. I'm so happy that you are going to support the work of Mr. Sohi and the council. And thank you, Harriet, for the work you do in the lives of young women. I mean, we really need our young women to be strong to take on the challenges of the future, which is not going to be similar to the challenges that we've been through over the years. It's going to be very different. So we need really, really strong women to move on. I am very happy to see more women take on leadership, and I'm so happy to see them breaking so many barriers and moving forward. And thank you so much for being so inspiring, all of you. Thank you.
Absolutely. I see some comments there. Thank you. Thank you, everyone who's listening, for taking time and listening to us. Lisa, you never know, I might call you sometime for
Yes.
questions.
we're going to meet up. This is, I can't wait to continue the conversation.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Thank you so much again, ladies. I'll see you later.
Yeah, see you. Thank you, everyone. Bye
Bye.
for now.